Welcome to this episode of Clinically Depressed. On this episode, we have Dr. Sebastian Gonzales. He is a chiropractor that runs the Performance Place Clinic and also Restoring Human Movement podcast, which we were lucky enough to be on a couple months ago. So if you want to go back and check that out, check him out at Restoring Human Movement podcast. In this, we really get into the depths of how Dr. Gonzales has really distilled down things to help people improve general aches and pains, and post that on his website and then also through the podcast. We really wanted to get to the baseline of how it is meant to be effective, how he has made it effective, and really how he got to the point of being able to break it down to really get people the basics. Within that, we also talked about getting the podcast out there and what that does. And if you could leave us a rating and review, we are giving away a free mobility kit that includes a foam roller, some soft tissue tools, and as well some bands to help with just general aches and pains. All you need to do is leave a review on Apple Podcasts, and we will go through, and we're still waiting for Nick Runn to get a hold of us at info@clinicallypressed.com to claim your mobility kit. Get a hold of us, let us know who you are, and we will get that to you. Enjoy the episode. Cool.
Awesome.
Well, we'll start it up
Take it
then.
away.
Welcome to this episode of Clinically Pressed. We are on with Dr. Seb Gonzales, who owns and runs the Performance Place and also the Restoring Human Movement podcast, which we just so happened to be on recently. Definitely worth checking out. But we're going to talk to him today. Not only does he do those two things, but he's put out a ton of content otherwise addressing a lot of very common things that you see in sports and athletics and just every day to day, and just how he's gone about creating all that, what he's found to work best for that. But before we get into that, Doc, if you want to give us some background on how you've got to where you are.
Yeah, sure. I got into this industry. I guess this would be chiropractic industry. First, I got injured in high school, probably just like every other person that got in this industry. They got hurt at some point and started hanging out with the people that they wanted to become. And so I hurt myself in high school playing baseball. I went through a bunch of, I don't want to say call it uneventful rehab or PT and chiro and massage and so on. Like I did a bunch of stuff, but it didn't get me back to the sport really. I got back to the sport finally after that, after that first run of rehab. I went and played in the very first game of baseball, very first swing, very first at bat. I was leadoff and I swung and hurt my back again. And so, yeah, it was really frustrating. And so I eventually found another guy who helped me out through that and got me back in the field really in a matter of a couple weeks after that. But prior to, like, they'd done CTs, bone scans, MRIs. I was supposed to be pre-op for a microdiscectomy. And so there was a bunch of stuff which we didn't really. Yeah. And so probably now, like, thinking you guys are probably like, well, we could have handled this in a couple weeks too, you know? And I think the same. But it was just very subpar I think in the care that I was given. And so now my clinical practice it kind of came from the style that the guy did back then, which I did that for about 4 or 5 years. It was a lot of soft tissue work based predominantly. When people come in, it was mainly soft tissue based, and it was kind of like we had a bunch of we had a bunch of gym equipment in the office back then, not my office, but his. And so I worked for him for like 5-6 years, probably after that injury. And I was kind of like the scheduler plus the assistant plus go teach bird dogs and bridges type of guy, and teach them how to use this machine, right? And so I did a lot of that stuff, but I really didn't know why and how it applied. And so kind of moving into the latter part of my career so far now is I started to realize how to actually utilize corrective exercise and utilize loading. And I really started to learn more of that when I started podcasting and learning from people, so that's kind of how I got into it. I still do a lot of stuff I used to do, but at the same time, it's like now it's like you picking which one for which person with which injury,
Yeah. What are some of your go-tos? I just got off a really interesting conversation with an athletic trainer that I know, and he opened my eyes to a couple different things I hadn't heard of. But like soft tissue wise, what are your go-tos or your favorites? And then is there any model or anything you follow kind of on the corrective or functional movement?
Yeah. I was thinking of this because I don't know. Have you guys actually tried to break down your clinical reasoning of how you're like, so if someone said, how do we do this? Break it down. Have you had to write it down yet?
No, I haven't taken that much time to think about it. No.
Well, I'm gonna do a workshop here in a couple of months, so I actually got to write it down. And I started to realize, and so I called it offloading musculoskeletal and neurological structures. And so from a soft tissue point of view, I predominantly came from a background of active release. I even did it before I went to chiro school, really. And so I've been exposed to it for a very long time. I have Justin Dean, actually, you had him on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Justin Dean is telling me about all this fascial distortion and all that stuff too. So it's interesting to me, but yeah, I have no formal training in it. When it comes to tissue work, that's kind of where I venture towards based upon what the person's kind of showing me. But kind of into the when I examine somebody, I look at all these, like I look at this rough cluster of data that they're giving me. And so as I started to think about how I'm going to present this to my colleagues, it's like, which person do you do tissue work on? Which one do you do loading? Which one do you do corrective? And what kind of route do you want to take? And so I started thinking about back to the McGill model. And you know how he does that, you cue the hard brace with the belly, with the fingers in the side of the belly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden it takes the person's symptoms away, and all of the pain generating movements are now all of a sudden cut in half. And so I started thinking about that. I'm like, how do we do this with other areas, And so the cueing to bias certain, I don't want to say muscles, but let's just say certain support systems or buttresses. I'm looking to figure out which area or which buttress might offload that structure. And if it looks like the person's not very conditioned, then I go to like straight up like corrective exercise model, more of a Guido Van Rysingen style with attractor states. And so, and sometimes those can be very, they can be very aggressive, but it depends on the symptoms I would use. And with other people, say like a flexion tolerant back, I would use a bunch of bird dogs, and we're trying to increase the amount of tone of the spinal erector group as well as get the glutes involved. So it really depends. And if they come from this is an extreme case. Guy came in with an elbow issue probably about 3 weeks ago or so. He called it medial epicondylitis. He lifted at the gym. He was not an Olympic lifter or anything. He was just a recreational guy, but he's strong. He can do like 10 to 15 pull-ups at any given time. It's not bad, right?
No.
And so yeah, I can do about 17. That's probably about my max, but so I respected him all of a sudden.
Yeah, right.
So he took like 3 months off, and he's like, it still hurts. I thought it would get better, right? And so I was like, how many pull-ups can you do now? And he's like, I haven't tried, but I bet I can do at least a handful. And so I said, do you think it'll hurt? And he said, maybe. And so we did a first pull-up. He was very, as I would describe it, he looked like he was trying to bicep curl the bar, right? And so kind of just observing that, I can scale him back to a corrective exercise or a tissue work or whatever. But in the same time, I thought I would cue him to wrap the shoulder blades around the rib cage first, kind of like cueing a front lever. And so I did that, and he could do 5-6 pull-ups, no problem, no elbow pain whatsoever. And so I guess I don't know if that answers the question, but tissue work when needed is nice, but I'm not married to the idea of any of these. I'm just looking at data points.
I think that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, I agree. Seemed like global movement patterns and how that applies to the patient and their goals.
Right. And I think you probably find too that it depending upon the amount of pain that they're in, those movement patterns become a little corrupt and they're hard to cue, or maybe just chill the system down a little bit, with some things. So, but yeah, that's the basic idea.
There's no cookie cutter approach. Is that what you're saying? Dang it.
It's always cookie cutter, and so
Yeah.
it's so simple.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I don't know. I'm sure that you've had your battles of when people ask what you do, Kyle. What do you tell them? Like, I'm sure they call and they're like, "What are you going to do with me?"
Yeah. I don't know. I liked your explanation. I basically just try to relate. I don't know. I guess kind of what I just said with the global movement, not just looking at isolating certain muscles, and tying that into a patient's goals. So, if it's a shoulder pain, that's going to tie in with the upper back and the neck, and more just a comprehensive look as opposed to just like getting so zeroed in on just that area of symptom.
Yeah. So it's not cookie cutter.
Yeah, I haven't found it yet. Still searching for it.
Well, I'm just curious now because I know do you guys take a lot of phone calls in your office, or do you just have the staff do it? So when someone asks you guys, like when they call and they say, "What are you going to do with me?" or "Hey, I just want a quick adjustment," or "I want a quick whatever," how do you guys address that question?
That's a you question.
If that's really what somebody's looking for, we will, just adjust them and get them feeling better. Typically, what we found with those types of patients that they tend to come back, whether it's a few months or more or less down the line, and typically it's the same type of thing. And I'll try to address that with individuals, and I'm not going to try to get them to do more than they're ready for. But eventually, it seems like some will come around and be like, okay, yeah, obviously this issue has been historically bothersome for me, and I can hopefully try to like tie in the big picture of like this is why, and whether putting them in a corrective exercise or some sort of screen or something and showing like this is what you should be able to do well, and show them how they can't do that. I think it helps them understand, okay, yeah, maybe there is something more underlying that is the cause of this repetitive symptom.
No, I like that. You're a better man than me because I'll kind of argue with them a little bit on the phone about but I like that you're giving them what they want. It's not harmful to them, but then you're educating them about what they need.
Yeah, I'm a big one for. I like to understand things, so I try to really, whether they like it or not, help them understand what's going on, and I think that does seem to help. Just kind of like that patient education piece.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked with a couple clinics right out of school that were more or less, I guess, the cookie cutter approach, and I really had a hard time with the patient education side of that thing because it didn't seem like it fit. If it was just like everybody gets this treatment plan, and just kind of preaching the subluxation, I guess. I don't see things as well that way. I see things more how are other things, I guess, relating into the global movement or, the whole body system in general. So it fits better with me. It tastes better when I'm trying to explain that I was not happy in practice, practicing that way, and nothing against that for those that do, but it just doesn't fit with me, I guess.
Yeah. I feel it. Side story, but I'm going to ask you the same question, Joel. So you get a second here to think about what you're going to say. I have an intern that he went back to New Jersey, and so he was working for. I mean, how does he get out of school? You gotta make a little money, and so he was working at this clinic that kind of operated that way, and he didn't really want to do it. And so he was asked to put like stem on people, and so people that had flexion tolerant backs. So he decided to do a creative approach, and he propped them up into a prone prop, and then put stem on their back, and then they felt better.
Nice.
He felt better about himself doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Great.
So Joel, when people come into you, then like, what are they looking for when they come to you?
So it's a unique setting because I get to see them daily or multiple times a day if I need to, just working in a collegiate setting. Um, it's been different because traditionally athletic training and what we're taught, very modality heavy. You go over rehab stuff. It's branching out into going into the other things, but with utilizing students who, as soon as they learn a new tool, you can always tell when they're taught something in their modalities class because that's all they offer for ideas for treatment right after that. And so, because we get the option of seeing them every day, I've tried to take the approach of, just like knee pain, generalized knee pain. We're going to work on a lot of other things that don't involve your knee, but I'm also going to do something to address the fact that they feel pain at their knee. Because typically we're going to try and kind of get them back to practice even that day or try and modify things. So I do a little bit of the Band-Aid approach, again, with the thought of do no harm. We're not going to make them worse. I don't know if we're actually going to improve it, but if they think so, but then also build in a lot of their stuff into their rehab and they don't even realize they're doing it.
I like it.
They're addressing a much bigger picture. Again, I have a ton of freedom with that because we don't bill. I'm not constrained by anything in that regard. So I can have a little bit more of a shotgun approach, but making sure we're not losing the underlying principles of what we're trying to accomplish.
I'm really jealous. I kind of want, I'm sure me and Kyle, I want that.
It is fun because I don't have to worry about some of the stuff that you guys have to. We were at a chiropractic conference and just listening to all the different stories that people have to deal with billing and patients and things like this. Like if a kid doesn't listen to what I'm doing, I just tell them to stop coming in, and it's not going to affect my personal bottom line. As long as I'm not telling everybody not to come in, I don't really have a job. But yeah,
Joel's in a unique setting too. It's nice with him running the sports performance center that he can tie all those correctives in. And you've said before how part of his job is keeping them away from the other part of his job. Like he wants, build these athletes up so they're not having to come into the athletic training center. But they've done some very unique things in there of, like he said, incorporating the correctives or like some more of the, I don't know, just hiding the stuff that maybe isn't as sexy for the athletes to do. That's just like incorporated into their program. So they're doing it and they still think that.
That's nice. Joel seems like the kind of father that would hide broccoli in someone's oatmeal, kind of thing.
I can see that happening. My wife's so big on smoothies right now, so like throwing spinach in that and part of that, I can see her doing that to our kids in the future.
Yeah.
We have them. Kind of coming back around. So, I had this, it was a little pie in the sky for it now, but, looking at, I wanted to have prehab programs for all our athletes and trying to push more information to them and getting them to buy in with it. And we talked about kind of off air, all the things that you've done in terms of providing information outside of just the one-on-one interactions or through your podcasts and having all these different resources. I guess to start off, like what kind of pushed you to wanting to develop all those? And then kind of on the second part of that, what have you found to be the most effective in delivering that information?
So I think that I mean, the one I personally enjoy the most is podcasting. Honestly, it's quick. I get to talk to people for an hour or so. The solo ones are a little bit more complicated, but I feel like, because I've had patients that have done this, like they're like, oh, you got a podcast? I'm like, yeah, it's like, you feel pretty good, right? And they say, yeah, I feel really good. I wish my friend would come here or do something like it, and I'm like, well, there's maybe something that's stopping them is just not understanding their stuff. And so I found that at least when I have a phone conversation with people, usually the conversion of people coming in is really good. Not always price. It's not always price dependent. Sometimes just people just need to understand a little bit more. And so, my thought originally was duplication of myself. And so if I'm having this conversation with you guys about, your shoulder issue, then maybe I need to record it,
Right.
so I believe in duplication of self. And back in the day when I was at that old office where we did a lot more like I said, we did a lot of I remember the first video I did was the cook hip lift, and we'd show it to everybody. And so I recorded it. And so when patients come in and they're like, "Hey, I forgot that one exercise," I'll be like, "Well, I sent you a link. There was a video." And they're like, "Oh, I didn't watch it." I'm like, "Well, I'll show you again, but you're going to have to pay me again." And so
water,
right.
force them to drink.
Yeah. And so now even on the website, I don't know, guys probably didn't find it. Like, my intention is that people don't find it unless they're actually patients and they've been led there a little bit.
Okay.
So when they go into the patient portal, at some point they'll encounter something that I've said, look for patient resources. And so it's this Google sheet that has a bunch of exercises cued in the way that I wanted, at least at that time of making the video. It's very similar to probably what they're going to hear me say in office, right? If I'm talking about deadlifting, I've said, turn the floor or spread the floor, crush the oranges, stand tall, attach the barbell to the zipper or something like that, right? And so they're like, this is so much to think about. I don't know how I'm supposed to do it. I'm like, well, just remember the cues. They're in the video. If you forget the movement generally, just watch the video. And so like I've created a lot of those things for people. Not necessarily like, and I told you so, like, hey, you should have watched it, like scolding them type of thing. It's just giving them the tools for success. And if they feel like they wanted that, and I had a lot of people ask for it, then I'll do it. With the podcast, a lot of times people will ask about I'll say long-winded questions. It's like, it seems that I just did release one recently on strength conditioning as an exit plan to care. And so I'll push people very quickly into a Dan John model, the push, pull, carry, squat, hinge. Mm-hmm. And they're like, because they're always like, well, what should I be doing at the gym for this shoulder issue? I'm like, well, let's scale back the pressing. And they're like, well, what does that mean? I'm like, do a plank. Well, what's after the plank? Well, maybe we do, maybe we do a single arm dumbbell pull or dumbbell row, or sorry, press. And so these questions just keep going. And then finally I recorded it because I want to give them the information, but I don't have time to do it because it's like 30 minutes to an hour every time. And usually it's the person who came right before the gap or lunch, and so it does happen. So I created those to duplicate myself, number one. The second thing is that, so I've created a bunch of other little things like I call them the mini guides, and they're on the website, they're on the store, the website. And so because I get a lot of views or visitors to the website, I get people who email me from all over the darn place with all these random questions. And I got really tired of sounding like an a-hole on an email and saying, hey, look, you live in Siberia. I can't help you. My medical license does not even allow me to guide care across state lines. By law, no one can suggest to you directly if they have not seen you and examined you. And they're like, I've had a couple people that are like, well, I live in Siberia. That medical law doesn't exist here. I'm like, yes, it does. You're just not part of the industry, probably. And so I'm like, look, I can't stop you from buying a book or a video or watching a video on it. But what I created in the mini guides was, and I'm very transparent with it. I say, look, I get a bunch of emails, and I know you're not coming here, and I know I'm not going there, and I know you're looking for showing something. And so what I'll do is I'll write down a template of basically what I do in my office with this similar condition that you believe that you have. I don't know if you have it or not, but this is what we do for that thing.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so, I mean, obviously there's the disclaimers in there and so on. But I say, look, these mini guides are like, they're like under $20. And so basically you're paying me to email you back, showing me what I do in the office for those things. And these videos are not even all the ones that I've done. It might be like Kyle showing something for a shoulder, that I thought was very useful that I do that he cued in a better way. And I just didn't have time to make a video. And so I say, I'm the curator of YouTube content for you. And here's how we, right. And so those are the mini guides. And honestly, I made those after I made the first one. I can make another one in about 30 minutes, so when people start emailing about random stuff, I'm like, well, there's a lot of people asking about IT band syndrome, whether it be a radiculopathy or not. Like, they're asking about that. So I'll create it, and I did, and that's why there's about 9 or 10 of them on the site.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So
for everybody that's asking, there's probably about 10 out there that are wondering the same information or more.
oh yeah, I know. Yeah, there's only a certain amount of people that actually email you on it, and so surprisingly, like it was funny. We bought for all the clinicians out there who are thinking about um, should we create some type of online program or online consulting, or I'm sure everyone's trying to do that on Instagram. And I'm personally of the belief that you can't suggest unless you've examined them. And so online consults kind of frighten the hell out of me, and I don't do it. And but no one's stopping a consumer from buying Stuart McGill's low back disorders. There's nothing wrong with education, in my opinion.
Right.
And so, and just from a price point standpoint, I created this book, which came from, actually, I'll start again. I created this large scale program for flexion intolerant backs because I had a lot of friends with the stuff. And I don't like taking money from friends, honestly. So I'm like, look, I don't want to take money from you, but I want you to get the care that you need. I'll examine you and give you these videos, and you just watch them. I wrote this big manuscript, and I said, please just proofread it for me. That's it. Right. And let me know how it goes. No one read it. No one watched them.
Oh.
And so they were like 200, it was like 260 pages long, to be fair. And I figured out that they were just kind of scared about the starting point of it. And so I broke that into two. And one's the book, one's the actual like how-to. But the reason I'm talking about this is because I made the how-to like I made it like $200, $300, right? And so those weren't selling anything, and they hardly sell at all. But I started realizing I'm still getting these emails in, so I made all these little mini guides. And then I woke up one morning, I had like 5 mini guides sold for $7, and I'm like, holy shit! Like, you know. So the reason I'm telling this story is that I think there's a soft spot in there, a price point for people where there's not a lot of fear. Like an online product like that, I don't even care if they return it. Like there's no sweat off my back. Just don't bug me. Like,
Right, sure.
right. And because I don't want to, I'm not administering care. Just return it. That's it. And it's a digital product. And so when I created those, I was actually surprised by the amount that the volume that sold. And it will get people into like the thought of like, say that IT band. They're like, huh, that worked. Why did that work? And maybe I'll actually seek care from somebody because this is a nerve-based problem, not an actual IT band. And so I think I'm helping more people actually with that. And so when people create stuff, I think they should probably stick to those price points unless they've found some other data that I haven't. So, or at least I haven't figured it out yet.
I think that makes sense to make it so it's not risky, yet the reward could be worth it. Because even I look at some of the ones out there, and it's just like, well, it's like $19 a month. Like, I don't really want to spend $19 a month personally, and I actually care about this stuff. Like, I want to know the information,
Right.
but I just can't convince myself to do it. So I can see how that might be harder, unless they're in significant pain and looking for a way out. But yeah,
I think Mike Boyle did one for like start for $1 type of thing. You know, I mean, I think if you have enough followers, the raw volume is
Right.
going to make it there.
Mm-hmm.
And who's going to cancel subscription for $1 a month?
Yeah, most people forget that even
Not even
exists.
gonna know.
Right.
And that's
Yeah.
something that jumps off, when you're looking at the credit card statement.
Yeah, it just has to be well under your probably well under your cell phone one
Right.
Yeah.
or your cable bill.
Trying to figure out how I want to ask this question. So just to use the IT band one as an example, and talking about the large amount of things that could actually be causing that, is that something that you try and focus on when you said about, maybe they actually go out and seek care, just basically do you start with, here's what I think could be the real simple things for IT band. And then say, here's a list of things that if these aren't working, you really should probably seek someone out to see if it's actually what's going on.
In the mini guide you're talking about?
Yeah.
So I kind of started with like we all need to be responsible for our own bodies, and whether you're going to watch these videos or not, you have to go see somebody, and not just from like I know you can do the disclaimer thing, but realistically, take care of your damn self. It's just not it. So like I try to like hammer that a little bit, and then I say that At least the IT band one is a little bit of a unique one because it would be blatantly something different than what they think. And so I usually preface it with something like, if this was an IT band issue, it would have resolved with stretching, foam rolling, and tissue work, right? And if they go onto Runner's World forums and so on, they're going to see that a lot of people have gotten help from those things. But if it's not, then you're probably the outlier, and stop beating a dead horse. And here's something else it could be. And then so I for that one, I broke it into a couple blocks. Is so what I'm assuming those people is they're probably, if they're searching for a solution, they probably have not had success with the other things. And so they're probably those outliers anyways, or I don't want to call them outliers. They're probably a majority, in my opinion. And so I start with McKenzie extension and like a sideline opener or something like that. And then take them through a McGill process a little bit, a bird dog, do some core stuff, do foot on single leg on ground stuff or SLDL, things like that. And so I'll put like one or two of the things that are like the things they're looking for in there, because I don't want them to think this is not what I signed up for. Right. You know, but I try to search through one, which is in another video. I've done a lot of videos on IT band stretching or foam rolling, but I'll try to find one that kind of reiterates more of the thing that I just said, where it's like, if this doesn't work, then it's because of probably this, you know, so they're getting hammered multiple ways by different people.
Right. Makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
I like it.
Yeah. But it'd be really tough just to stick to the IT band only, because I think we all know that it's probably something else.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
But we know what they're asking for.
Right.
Like, but it's not going to help. It's not really going to help.
Really. So
yeah.
You had certain topics or areas that you've found that people are more interested or concerned with? Like, is it like general low back pain, or is it more specific areas?
I think probably the most of the emails I get are one about ulnar neuropathy, or not ulnar neuropathy, numbness in the fourth and fifth fingers, just because of one of the articles that presents really highly on my site. I get a lot of runner-based conditions, ankles and knees, and it seems like, and when I read their stories, it's and I don't like to think that I'm married to a certain theory, or like I might be. I'm sure I have my biases like everybody else, but when I read through them, their stories sound very much neurological based symptoms. You know, they're like, oh, there's a little bit of a dull ache. Oh, it's worse in the morning with the first step, and that kind of thing, right? Mm-hmm. And so with each of those mini guides, I try to put a little thing in there that would kind of address that a little bit. But interestingly, a couple of things that I've gotten a lot of emails on, actually one in particular rather, is an oblique strain, because I personally had one probably about 4 or 5 years ago. And so with a lot of the injuries that I have within the parameters of my professional career, I tend to write about, like, diary forms so I can remember, and I tend to research them a lot. So hamstring tears. I actually had a hamstring tear with a visible bruise. In the oblique strain, it happened over the course of a baseball game, and here's the things that I did personally to make it improve. And so it's been interesting when I have the real storyline behind it that is really me, the responses I get from people, it's like they're like literally almost in tears that, oh my God, like I read your story and it was so inspiring to me, and I have this and I can't get better, and what do I do, right? And so they're very different than my ankle hurts, what do I do?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So they're really bought in on those. Really sad, the oblique strain area. It seems like there's not a big market for them out there. These people are suffering everywhere with that stuff.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's cool. Have you received overall pretty good feedback then on the guides from, the people that have purchased them, or have there been, I guess, is it mixed, or are people, like you mentioned, getting something that they weren't expecting?
Yeah, I haven't had any lashback yet. There was only one lashback on a different thing that I made years ago, that it was only a single email, but it kind of pushed me into making a larger scale thing. Like I actually made an ebook, like a 150-page ebook about numbness of the fourth and fifth finger. I guess I'll start on that because I'm already alluding to it. It was like, so originally when I started that, it was the big old article, right? And so I said, I made like 5 line items. It was nothing fancy. It was like a Google Doc, which I converted into a PDF. No colors, no frills, no borders, a couple pictures here and there, a couple links to videos. It was like 5 things. And so I think I was selling it for like $22 or something like that. And so this lady bought it, and within about like 2 minutes, she had returned it, and already I got a nasty email about $22 for 5 pages, and so she was pissed. And I said, fine, take your money back. I don't care. It's a digital product. And I could tell number one, 2 minutes, you haven't even looked at it yet, or watched anything. But so because of that, I made something larger scale. And when I made something larger scale, no one bought it. And so I've retracted down again, but this time when I made it smaller, I decided to frame it. And I think framing, or the communication of what they're going to get in it, it mitigates the problem. But I have had people. I remember this one guy in particular. It was an ankle one. I don't know where he lived, but it was like I envisioned like this old guy living in like Croatia, because he said that he had this foot problem, right? I don't know what it was. But some of the suggestion was walking on like uneven roads and things that have like rocks on it, or gravel, right? Dirt roads, because of the strengthening the toe flexors, or the intrinsic foot. And so he did that, I guess. And he emails me about 3-4 weeks later, and he says, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing. I feel so good." And so this is why the reason why I envision him in this old place is because he told this long-winded tale about how he used to walk up this road to a well when he was younger and a kid, and he hadn't done it for years. And so when he picked the dirt road, he went up that road, and he was walking that road every day. And after about 2 minutes or so, it would be painful, so he'd come back, and he kept pushing through, and now he can walk with no symptoms, or at least at the point of that email. And so and like you said earlier, that probably for every 10 people that get it, only one's going to say anything. But I had a person with the finger thing that they said they read the book, and they were able to play. It was guitar or piano. They were somebody of a musician, and so they were able to play again, which they hadn't been able to for a year. And so like I'm glad they're helping people. I wish they would. I hope they're seeing somebody. But I sleep well at night thinking that these people are finding care, or sorry, I should retract care. They're finding ideas in desolate places where they have to walk up a dirt road to a well.
There you go.
Right. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So, just kind of moving along, for keeping an eye on the time frame of all of this. Moving into our clinically pressed questions that we ask everybody. What is something that you may believe in that others may not? That could be anything.
Gosh. Can I say 23andMe? I think it's a scam. I think it's the government's way of getting our data.
Wow. I like that one too. That is something we haven't gone through.
That was quick too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I'm not like a conspiracy theory person, but it's like, you ever go online and you look up like People Finder? And I did this one time. I looked up my own name on People Finder, and then so it knew my name, kind of roughly where I lived. It knew my dad's name, and it knew my grandpa. And I thought at one time it was because people were voluntarily giving their information on Facebook,
right.
which might be because at that point the only spot where I told anybody or any computer that I was 101 was Facebook, and it thought I was 101. And so it made me think a little bit. But then we also had a cousin who was very active on familytree.com or whatever it was. And so she had filled out all that stuff. And so it was voluntary information. And so I believe that 23andMe is another one of those, but for blood or for DNA.
Wow.
Interesting.
Huh.
And so if I disappear, by the way,
I will never think of it the same.
So that's probably the only thing. Medically, I don't know if I have anything. I think people are super resilient. I think we treat people like they're fragile, and I think people treat themselves like they're fragile, but I don't think we are.
I like that one. Yeah, I think
sure.
there's a lot more resilience there than people understand.
Oh yeah. Cool. What's your most influential purchase under $100, whether fitness or otherwise?
In what category?
Anything you choose. Typically, we stick to fitness, health, that type of thing.
Influential. Gosh, can I pick two?
Yeah.
I'm going to go with Dan John's intervention video, $40. And I'm going to go with McGill's low back disorders. It's like 70, right?
Okay. How much was the first one, did you say?
Dan John's was about $40.
Okay.
I think.
Okay. I have to look that one up.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, the McGill one goes into any other like book recommendations, and we're always looking for things that aren't necessarily just about health and fitness and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. From a marketing perspective, there's a free one. It's .com Secrets by Russell Brunson. Very easy read. It helps me a lot with storytelling. It's you can obviously go very complicated topics, but for the most part, I think storytelling is where it's at. And that one, you just they'll give it to you for like $8 or something like that. You pay for the shipping.
Nice.
Sweet.
Yeah, but you're getting their funnel, so beware.
Oh yeah, as with most things these days, there's always a catch.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Always a string attached.
So if you were to tell yourself, like your former self, something that you know now, what information would you tell your former self if you could go back, and whether that's 5 years, 10 years, you name the time frame as well.
Gosh, I think I'm hard pressed to not want to make all these clinical, but I would probably tell myself just to relax a little bit, like don't sweat the small things. It's not that big of a deal. And as much as like I might fret about and like worry about like the way some interaction went with a patient or a person or a gas station attendant or whatever, like they forgot it already, probably, and so it's just not worrying about. And so I now call it productive worrying. If it's not going to do anything, don't worry about it.
I need to tell myself that more often than I do, actually.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
So last one, in your area of expertise, how would you make what you do that is complicated simple?
My area of expertise, how would I make something complicated simple?
Yep.
Geez, is this for myself or for somebody else? They're for people, for listeners. Oh, sorry, for listeners.
Yeah. If you were to take something that you do that is very complex, how would you break it down and make it simple for someone that you're explaining it to?
Well, probably. So a couple months ago, I started trying to think about how to reverse engineer things. And the things that we see clinically, I think, are adaptations of situations, chronic or usually chronic situations or loads. And so I wrote myself an email one day so I wouldn't forget. And it's always towards the top 5 of my email box as soon as I start to pick away at the things. And there's nothing in the body. It just says in the title, what's the adaptation? And so when you see someone with in their hair's turned gray, why did it turn gray? And so try to find one level step down, and just see if you can solve the problem, not by addressing the adaptation. I don't know if that makes it simpler, but
it gives you a game plan to look at it, though.
Right.
I like the reverse engineering part of it. I've heard that in a couple of different arenas and different avenues.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know Tim Ferriss's big one is like, what if I did the opposite? If this is how you're always supposed to do something, what if you just flip it on its head? Can it still work?
Sure it can.
Yeah.
That's why people start doing handstands, bro.
Right.
Yeah.
No one uses handstands for anything. By the way, I don't know if you guys have answered this or not, but I've thought it a lot over the years. And yesterday I had an opportunity to use it. So since we're doing a lot, like people do a lot, they do a lot of lifting for fitness, and it's a lot of overhead lifting, repetitive reps and snatches and jerks and so on. And so I don't tend to do it a lot, but I believe it's a lock, press, and hold, and then you stay there. And so I had a friend. We were putting drywall on the ceiling, and so I did the lock and press like this with I don't know how heavy it was, but it was heavy, and I was lasting about 30 seconds or so, and I was just starting to fall apart. And I had to walk up a little step stool to get to the ceiling, right? And so I started kind of thinking about, like, I had that theory in the past of why are we doing it, but then the functional application, wouldn't it just be press holds and walks or something? Like, I know we're doing that, and everyone seems to be married to the idea of barbells, but why not just go to like CrossFit gyms and put sheets of like drywall out there,
Right?
and blowing in the wind? Look at that dynamic systems theory,
Oh man, yeah.
The true definition of functional.
Yeah, right.
It's hard.
Oh yeah.
I've done that, and it's like you're thinking in your head, the other guy, like, get that screw in faster.
Yeah, right. Yeah, hurry up. I don't care what you're doing, just one, even the wrong space.
Look good. That's awesome.
So kind of in closing, where can people find you? Websites, podcasts, feel free, plug away.
Plug away. Okay. The website, or if you're looking for anything that I produce, the website's the quickest way, or it's just the easiest way because I house everything there. But obviously, you can pick and choose. So the site is P2. It's the letter P, the number 2. Sports is plural, care.com. So P2sportscare.com. Everything's mainly on the homepage, or there's a comprehensive search bar. You just search and you'll probably find anything you want. The website is gigantic. It's probably like 300 unique pages. So so we had to do a search function in there. The podcast is called Restoring Human Movement. It releases weekly. I think we're up into like the 140 range. Some of your listeners probably like that I've had McGill on there. I've had Brett Winchester on there. I've had Richard Olm on there. I've had Dan John on there. I've had Michael Shacklock on there. I've had a bunch of really good people. Yep. And so dig into the archives a little bit and subscribe. That's what I would love. That's kind of it. I think that's the most part where all your listeners are going to like. If they're long format listeners, the podcast is it's probably where it'd be 100% honest with you. And I tell patients this all the time, where they're like, hey, I've been through like 3 bouts of PT or chiropractic, and this didn't work. What makes you different? I'm like, honestly, with your condition, I wouldn't have referred you to myself 5 years ago, and I've learned a lot. And especially over the last 2-year stretch where I was doing the podcasting and interviewing these people, there was a lot of aha moments. And so it opened my eyes. So if you guys want to follow along with those ahas and improve your clinical skills, just as I'm always trying to get better, then the podcast is the way to go.
Awesome.
I like it. I agree. Awesome.
Sweet.
Well,
thanks for taking the time.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. Pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you for checking out this episode of Clinically Pressed. Go to clinicallypressed.com for full show notes and links to everything that we covered in this episode. While you're there, you'll have full access to all our episodes, insights, and shorts. You can find Clinically Pressed on YouTube or any podcast outlet that you use. If you could give us a rating, thumbs up, or a review on how we're doing, we would greatly appreciate it and heard it helps out quite a bit. To get more free content delivered straight to your inbox, sign up for the Total Athletic Therapy newsletter at totalathletictherapy.com or clinicallypressed.com. You'll get direct links to all the new Clinically Pressed episodes, reviews on some of the latest research in health and performance, and links to related podcasts and other items meant to help you make the complicated simple and optimize performance. Thank you for listening, and see you next episode.